The first part of this video is me reading basically stuff you can just look up. But here we go. The International Court of Justice, or IJC, or World Court in Hague. 15 judges elected by the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council for a 9-year term to act as judges. The Security Council and the General Assembly and the International Court of Justice is 3 of 6 parts of basically the UN. The other parts are called the Secretariat, Economic and Social Council, and Trustee Council. And each of these things have subparts. What is the job of the International Court of Justice in The Hague, or the World Court? To settle disputes between states that are members of the UN that have agreed to abide by and obey the UN International Court of Justice. Mostly it settles disputes between states by being an arbiter by agreement only, giving advisory opinions on international legal issues referred to it by the UN in general. Its opinions and rulings serve as a source for international law and can be used as a source to cause international law agreements between countries. The United Nations does not have the ability to enforce or create law. It doesn't. The United Nations has declared repeatedly, and one time when one of the member states was out of the building so they could get away with it, that a certain country was guilty of something and said that they had to do something, and not a fucking thing happened. Actually, it's happened repeatedly, including to the United States. The members of the UN, the main sitting body, Russia, the United States, I think China, a couple of places like that, have major power, can just ignore them. Or, but my FEMA camp meme, I have to have it so I can be motivated every day to get up and not just be lazy or something. Most of us have realized during COVID-19 that whatever gets you up in the morning to get things done may be the only thing keeps you from just, sitting there and just forgetting about breathing. I understand that. But this shit's been going around a long time, these conspiracy theories about the UN being somehow an evil satanic organization created somehow by a bunch of people who literally just ignore it. The United Nations, white helmets, everything, unless they're invited into an area, usually can't do much. There are exceptions. But the whole point of the UN is to give legitimacy to the entire United Nations member states being able to just say no to any particular future Adolf Hitler. It gives credence to an agreement. And most of the time, it's accused of being a puppet for the United States or Russia or China or whatever. Now we're going to go way back in time with another piece of information. This will be referred to back if I have time in the video. It's disputed as far as the timing, but from 597 BC, that's a long time ago, to 539 BC, slightly less ridiculously long period of time ago. Jews, after the conquest of the kingdom of Judah, were detained in Babylon. This ended less than 60 years later after the fall of Babylon. Claiming it's a different number would require that you specify what years. It could be any duration, and it should be pointed out that except for independent corroboration by scientists and actually people digging crap up and confirming any of this, and written history, most people just look up shit in the Bible and say that must be true, that talk about this. Many of you may not have heard of this. And the thing is, the numbers here are wrong and off and probably not really worth it. But it's around 60 years, so we can call it 60, 70 years, or whatever. And there is a claim, of course, that it was done as some specific reasoning in some conspiracy theory. Again, yet another component being dragged into conspiracy theory based on outright ignoring some silly detail like 60 years versus 70 or 71. 1874. The United Nations, not before this, the United Nations Universal Postal Unit was established not necessarily by the United Nations, but by the Treaty of Berne. What is it? Well, it's part of some conspiracy, of course. No. It coordinated postal agencies in different countries that agreed to be coordinated so that they could ship things around the world. 1870s. Not 17. 1870s. Only among UN member nations. The other countries don't have to agree to it. It created standards for delivering the mail. Each member agrees to the same terms for conducting international postal duties. This is literally just like, can we all get together and come up with some standard on how we acknowledge that the cost for mailing something has been paid between countries? Because if you don't do that, I can mail something from here to New York, that's fine, but if I cross the border 50 feet into Canada, they can say that the postal charges haven't been paid. And obviously there has to be some sort of give and take with the money going back and forth, because the U.S. Postal Service, or any postal service, is essentially a shipping company. And it's in everybody's best interest in countries that want to be able to send letters, really lightweight items, to get them from point A to point B accurately. And I want to point out that if you're south of the border of the United States, depending on what country you're in, their idea of how a postal system works depends on whether or not someone gives a shit about losing the mail. Unless you make it look important by stamping it with lots of funny colored stamps, that's actually a joke about sovereign citizens, by the way, your mail might be lost because someone just says, it doesn't matter. The guy paid a nickel. I don't care. I need to go home. There's a flash flood. I mean, dead ass, that shit happens, okay? It's lost in the mail. That's where that comes from. But anyway, 1737, Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia was made the Philadelphia postmaster before we declared independence. It was still an English colony. 1753, he and William Hunter were also appointed Postmaster General of America. 1753. But Franklin was judged to be too sympathetic to the colonies and had a falling out with the Crown of England. After the Hutchinson affair, whatever that is, you can go look it up. It's not relevant. The point is, at that point, he wasn't Postmaster General of the United States and was not appointed by England. 1753. He was dismissed in 1774. In 1775, Ben was appointed a member of the Second Continental Congress and elected head of committee to establish a new postal system, or be in charge of the current postal system and retooling it, and then was appointed by the newly created, rebel government to be the Postmaster General of the USA. Pretty much to tweak the nose of England. He'd been running as Postmaster General from 1753 to 1774. So that's a long period of time. He was the one who had the job before. They just put him back in it when they figured out that he was not only loyal to them, but had been fired because he was. He was not appointed by England in 1775 or 1776 because they couldn't do so. Someone will contradict this because it's a well-established fact recorded by fucking the history books in England, the United States, and everywhere else. So someone invented this story in what year? 1970s. Somebody came up with a bullshit story about Ben Franklin. Based on a presumption that the United States is still a British country and a colony and a corporation or something. Because you have to have that be proven. Anything that contradicts that is bullshit. And any sequence of events that literally have nothing to do with each other, or if they have a synchronization of 71 years that's based on you ignoring 60 or less, that must be proof of your belief system. Let's go for it. There's a presumption the United States is a British colony by a bunch of people who then want to use British law to control how the court system works so they can get out of having to pay for a parking ticket. At which point they're told, you're in an American court, we're an independent country, not sovereign, independent country, and we don't recognize your bullshit story, and now you're going to jail for wasting our time. That's the conclusion, as of today's date, and actually for almost a decade now. Bringing up a lie like, we're a British colony, I want to have a crown court. or misinterpreting words in a courtroom is bread and butter to sovereign citizens. They just babble shit. And you have to now read off a statement that's trusted only as an assertion, not backed up with corroboration or evidence, by a person named Winston Shrout. He was convicted by a jury of his peers of submitting fake documentation and instruments to banks and the U.S. Treasury, trying to defraud them out of money. Good going. Trying to pass a big check? Bad check? I got you better. I'll make up a fake security and claim to be the King of England. That's the kind of shit he did. He also made the following statement, and this is a direct quote that always goes back to him in 2017 or earlier. 2012, 2010. Under Anglo-Saxon rules of bankruptcy, a nation can go into bankruptcy for a period of 70 years because Jews did it. Yeah, it's referring to something that wasn't even 70 years. This is all built on a really big stack of presumptions. They're all shifting underneath you because they're made out of ice covered with peanut butter, and we're supposed to listen to this. So this is the assertion made by this and many other people, and it's been built up as like an alternate reality fan fiction, sort of like anything you want to think of, steampunk stuff. I mean, this is fun stuff, but these are made-up realities. 1775, the U.S. borrowed a bunch of money from France. 1775 also, England appointed Ben Franklin as Postmaster General. No, they did not. 1789, the Constitution was created to create a bankruptcy. This is a presumption because at that point, when we became an independent country, there's a presumption we didn't pay it back, so we owed them. Okay, but that doesn't mean we're bankrupt. That just means we're just saying I'm not going to pay anything. So the presumption is the clock started ticking at exactly 70 or 71 years, depending on which way you look it up. I'm saying 70, so it's a round number. Well, it's not really a round number. It's a shitty one. 60 would be just as round. The claim is then, without anybody giving an explanation, that the Rothschilds somehow purchased this debt owed to the France away from them, or paid the debt for the United States government, and held this by going through the Bank of England. Now, that actually could be just the Rothschild family deciding to pay off the debt and saying, you owe us one. That would mean, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, let us get out of some Epstein shit later, I guess. Except that's the 1700s and nobody gives a shit. But okay. But you'd have to show some basis for that. Now, I'm going to actually look that up, obviously, but let's move on. We got to bulldoze this. By 1800, this first bankruptcy law was enacted. It allows only for involuntary bankruptcy of traders. Traders. Apparently someone's going to misinterpret that when they hear it in a YouTube video. A bunch of people cited a YouTube video as evidence that this was true. So it could have been traitors? The second bankruptcy was supposed to be with the establishment of state governments because somehow that causes bankruptcy. A new corporation was formed. This was 1859. 1871, a new corporation was formed called the United States of America, even though that's literally not real, to consolidate 5 districts of the Washington, D.C. area into one new corporation to assume the debt. But the debt is owned by the Rothschilds and owed to them, right? Universal Postal Union bankruptcy contract with Hawaii was created. I couldn't find any evidence of this happening ever. The Hawaiian king became part of the international ability to transfer mail. Then there's the U.S. Federal Reserve Act, which was supposed to complete or end that bankruptcy. Then 1929, collateralization of people, gold, etc. for X number of years, 70 years again. And then in 1999, the electronically equitable title through CE, yada, 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 ended that and began a new bankruptcy. These are assumptions based on a 70-year international bankruptcy cycle on purpose, based on the 70-year period of Jewish captivity. And again, somehow invoking and blaming the Jews. The Founding Fathers were members of the Crown as attorneys, and therefore signed on for life, and everything they signed was in honor of the Crown. Or they were rebels and traitors against England, and that no longer matters any And even they said that as well. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with all of that.